And now what am I filming here? It's my tomato bed. I've already done a video update for this during the summer, but I just wanted to capture it on film because we're about to lose pretty much everything in this bed. My tomatoes are gonna go, peppers are gonna go, so this is the Malabar spinach just laden with seed that we're gonna spread all over the yard. And you can see the comfrey loves the colder weather. Wetter weather. You can see I've been up in here getting some maters out of there. And I also wanted to capture this pepper. I don't know what this pepper is. This is mother-in-law gave it to us peppers from El Paso. So really good stuff. Big pepper plant. You see, here's my hand, which is closer to the camera. Give you a little bit of scale. And this is a separate pepper plant. It goes, this is about I'd say 3.5 foot high. Yeah, 3.5 foot high, whatever it is. I don't think there's any peppers on it. Oh, there we go. I think it's the same type as the one I just showed you. Malabar, that's going to die in the freeze. The maters are going to die in the freeze. So let me step back and get a full shot of my my little tomato bed. I don't like to dedicate a lot of space to tomatoes. To me, they're kind of a waste of space, but for permaculture, but at least in this part of the world. But yeah, there we go. There's my beautiful green tomato bed. So the Malabar will die, the spinach will die, the Malabar and the spinach. The Malabar spinach will die, the tomatoes will die, the peppers will die. Pretty much all that'll be left after this will be some browned up asparagus, and then some ground cover type stuff like oregano and wild strawberry. But the wild strawberry oregano, that'll all live through the winter. So there's actually oregano stuffed way down up inside. You may not think it would grow well, but it does. Outside of that tomato bed that I just filmed, I have 2 self-sprouting tomatoes that made it through the summer. They aren't going to make it through the freeze most likely, although this is in a sheltered location. And I should mention that my tomato bed is also like in a slightly sheltered location, a little bit of a microclimate. It's shielded from the north wind. It has a cedar tree over the top of it, just like this one does right here. So it might survive the freeze. I've had tomatoes survive as low as 28 degrees because they're in these little microclimates. So it got pretty decently large. This is the one growing in almost total shade. You can see it's probably about 3 foot long. Of course, I didn't trellis it. When they self-sprout, I let them do their own thing for the most part, because nature tends to know what it needs to do better than the gardener does. And I think it produced 1 fruit, but it's not going to ripen. I don't see any other fruits on it. So we'll see what happens there. Let me take you over to the other one. Don't worry, I'll spare you the walk. Okay, here we go. And this concrete stuff you see here is an aerobic septic system. I'm going to do a video on this soon. Basically, we use 100% of all of the household wastewater, and this is how we do it. So one day I'll do a video on that. It's not that magical. But I have these tomatoes, you can see them here, going all the way down, that I had extra tomatoes. I just slapped them in there. And they're growing, and they got plenty of tomatoes on them. See? I don't think any of them are going to ripen in time. But this is not a sheltered location, so most likely all this is going to die. So this guy has got rather huge, and I didn't really trellis him either, other than to poke this stick in the ground, which I mainly did just to mark it when it was small, so I didn't mow over it. But you can see it got decently large. It grew better than any of the tomatoes that I grew in the yard, other than the ones in the tomato bed. So outside of the tomato bed, this one grew the best, and I didn't even plant it. So it's got several tomatoes on it. You can see more than just 2. There's several actually. See them in there. So I just wanted to document it because it's about to go away, and I'll keep you guys posted on how things go through the freezes and everything, so you can see how my crop choices have fared. All right, what you see here is purple tree collard, and I only have 2 of these in the yard, and it's about to have a freeze. So I've had these survive down to 20 degrees. So I'm not going to do anything with it right now. I'm going to harvest some of the greens, of course. But right before it gets too cold, I usually come in and cut some stalks. You want to make sure they have nodes on them. And I'll put them in the refrigerator probably for until I can get to them, not usually longer than a couple weeks. And then I'll put them in some potting soil and they will root just from cuttings. And that's how you propagate these guys. That's why I don't really consider these very good for permaculture in North Texas. And I'm just filming it right now just to kind of capture it before the freeze and after the freeze so we can see how it fares. So how did the tomatoes and peppers fare through the freeze? Well, you're looking at it. They completely lived. So it's 2 nights of freezing, and none of the flowers look damaged. None of the leaves look damaged. So all the fruits look fine. I did talk to my mother-in-law and find the name of these chiles, Chile de Arbol. Now, I'm probably butchering the heck out of that. That's Chile of the tree, I think, is what it translates to. So yeah, there you go. Look at this. I can take you through all the other ones, the self-sprouted tomatoes, the self-seeded tomatoes. They all did fine because everything is in some kind of a microclimate. So like I mentioned in the beginning is that this, at least I should have mentioned, this is shielded from the north by this fence and all of the neighbors' structures and properties and trees. And of course, this is underneath a ash juniper. And then there's all the other polyculture crops inside here and all the leaf cover and everything above the ground. It holds in some residual heat. So without covering it with plastic, you can still survive sub-freezing temperatures. And obviously it's not going to be invincible. If it gets cold enough, it still will freeze. But I can dip below 32 degrees for a few hours with no problem, as long as it ain't too far below. And everything seems to be just fine. You can see we got pretty good universal survival. I think we may have had a little bit of trouble here on the outer edge. You see those leaves, but the ones down low and in the leaf cover are doing much better. So it's a little bit more exposed on this corner of the bed than the other parts I started with. So there you go, folks. You know, minimal effort trying to grow tomatoes in this eco-region is my goal. I don't think they're great for permaculture, but I think that if you grow them this way, putting them in microclimates, instead of trying to have like 10 really large plants that you water constantly and trellis, maybe have 50 plants just spread all over the yard wherever they will self-seed, and you'll end up with approximately the same amount of fruit with a lot less effort. There we go. Okay, I lied a little bit. I am going to show the self-seeded tomatoes, you know, how they survive, but mainly so I can discuss what I think I'm going to do going forward with tomatoes. You can see this tomato is just laying on the ground flat and kind of growing like a ground cover, and it's got just as many tomatoes as the ones that are trellised, and it's growing in almost total shade. This one's seeded where it decided, and if you know about self-seeding, you know that what you really are looking for are those pioneer crops. So you're growing a particular crop and you give it its ideal conditions, and then it starts to self-seed, and then some of those seeds will bust out into an environment, like in my case, the Cross Timbers native ecosystem, and grow just fine there. This particular plant has had no supplemental water, and I have another one I showed in a short that's in the shade, almost total shade, and it's had no supplemental water the entire stage 5 drought, and yet it's producing. And to me, that's more of what you would want in a permaculture situation. Low maintenance, low resource usage, but still yielding relatively close to what the more manicured traditional farmed crops yield. So going forward, I'm going to grow tomatoes on the ground like a ground cover. They don't seem to care. I'm going to use the genetics of these pioneers that are self-seeding themselves into the grass and the more harsh environments. And I'm going to probably grow more quantity of tomato plants so it will yield the same as highly manicured, smaller quantity of tomato plants. I just wanted to take a quick second to kind of show you something to compare the tomatoes and Malbar to. This is another Malbar spinach. It has a similar cold tolerance to tomatoes, and you can see how it just looks miserable. The cold was not nice to this. It's out in an exposed location, so it took the full brunt So you can see this is all just going to die right here, this floppy part. So really important to try to put your crops somewhere where they might have a little bit of shelter if you're planning on not covering or doing a greenhouse, which is kind of the philosophy I take. I try as much as possible not to do, or at least choose my crops based on if they can survive out in the open in our natural conditions in this ecosystem for my permaculture stuff.